So, yeah, let's just continue where we left off, really. We have been talking about doing a podcast, mother-daughter duo type of thing. And so this will be added to our Sparks Village YouTube channel. And essentially, it will kind of be surrounding really all topics, but specifically ones that like we're passionate about. And I guess today we've already started the conversation because we have all these deep conversations all the time, and we just need to start actually putting them out there for the world to see and put in on. But I think the conversation that we've started already is just surrounding the things we pass down to our kids, how to be intentional about, I guess, helping them with those things. And the big one for me right now is anxiety because like I said, Zaya's 5, but I already see it in like the way she kind of fiddles with her fingers when she talks, and she kind of rushes to get her words out because I don't know, she feels like she's not going to be heard or not going to be understood. So it's just a lot of, and for a 5-year-old, like I felt really bad last night because it was just like, girl, you can calm down. Like it's okay. And I don't know what I like I said, the only thing I could think about is the anxiety that I've been dealing with. And I know that it comes from routines and security, like growing up in such a, which it sounds like I'm making a bad thing out of a good thing because it's like growing up in such a in a household where I know for a fact we going to the grocery store on a Saturday. I know for a fact we getting up and going to church on Sunday. I know for a fact that if we run out of something, it's another one somewhere. I just gotta locate it. Growing up with that security has also made me want for that in my life, but it
In your
might
adult
be a
life, in
reach.
your home
Yeah, in my
environment
adult
now.
life,
Yeah.
but it might be a reach, and that might not. How do I find peace and security in insecurity, if that makes sense? So, like, especially financially, financial insecurity is like a big thing for me. I came out the gate making sure I had enough money to pay all my bills, as a fresh out of college adult. And then now making certain sacrifices to be able to homeschool, to be able to, start my business. Like, but that means something different and it looks different for my household. How do I find peace in that and not be overly anxious every day? Like when I was late on my car note, I didn't sleep for a month. Like I kept waking up. And the crazy thing about it is that I never know how, like, I don't even know how late bills and stuff work. You know what I'm saying? Nobody ever taught this to me because they didn't have to. Y'all always, well, from my perspective, y'all always had it. And so, for example, I was wondering like every night, like, am I gonna wake up and my car gone? You know what I'm saying? And Dee was like, they actually do a lot before they actually come pick up your car. Like you can relax. But I couldn't because I'm like, are we gonna wake up and the light's gonna be off? Because this bill $30 behind. Like, I never let things get super bad, but it's just like, yeah, we might have to let up a little bit here or let up a little bit there. And doing that, I have so much anxiety because I'm used to balance being zero. I don't care what the situation was. Even if I didn't have money, I was making sure that the bills were paid. And this isn't shade, you know what I'm saying? It's just is it's different right now for us. That our life looks different right now. The times
What
look
you're
different.
accustomed to. And I think that's difficult for anyone. I can remember having anxiety when I wasn't working because from the time I left my mom's house up until I was pregnant with Darielle, I kept a job. I could fill out an application and I never had to worry, never, ever. And not that I'm boasting about that. I'm grateful that God always provided me with an opportunity. So when I was without work, it brought about a different type of anxiety. It actually put me into a state of depression. And I don't know if you recall that as a kid, but the time frame where I wasn't working, you were about 4 years old, and I was pregnant and I couldn't find a job to save my life. I had never experienced that in my life. That put me in a depressed mode, and I didn't want to do anything. Like, I just sat around the house because it's amazing how one situation can provoke so much anxiety that it just takes your whole being and shifts, right? Because I'm one of those people, I'm always bubbly, I'm always laughing, I'm always finding something humorous in the situation. Love to have a good time. And so for me, that was a really, really hard time. And I was like struggling with life because
Hmm.
what? I don't have a job. Like
Hmm.
me, I have skill sets that are applicable to multiple positions, but it provokes a different type of anxiety when you're going through that moment, and learning to relax in that moment, knowing that things are going to work out is a difficult task. And I think a lot of people don't share that, because how dare you show a sign of weakness, and how dare you show a sign of emotion like you're human, because everybody's supposed to be robots, right? And now I can't even imagine in your shoes, because social media and high expectations are the norm.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on a lot. The first thing that I feel like you acknowledged was like mental health, and I feel like that's an important like part of your story for one, because I think that there's a lot of conversation around mental health for Black men, but the conversation around mental health for Black women, I feel like the only time we give Black women grace is right after they had a baby.
I was gonna say
Like if
postpartum.
you have postpartum depression, it's like, girl, what do you need? I'll come clean your house, blah 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 blah. But it's like, what about everything else? Like, what
What
about
about the
bills
stresses
depression?
of
What
being a
about
mom, a
life
single
depression?
mom, multiple kids, all of these things, trying to provide, trying to take care of. And and one of the things I think that people don't really think about with your mental health is, as you get older and people around you are dying, whether it's your aunties, uncles, parents, whatever that looks like, and then you're still trying to put on a smile even though grandpa just died. You got to hold your kids up and keep them pushing forward. And so what that takes, and nobody considers that.
And even before people start dying, because I think that you go through phases in life, right? So I don't think I'm to that phase of my life, but I do think that you also get to a point where like you don't live around all of your friends anymore. You don't live, you know what I'm saying? Like
You're not
your
living the high school life no more.
yeah, your friends aren't y'all not talking every day and going out every weekend. Like you're just kind of in this space of like evolution, like you're finally coming into your being, but that also means that everything around you has to shift. And while you're doing that, you still have to show up as a mom. And then I think another thing that you touched on was like, I think the big part of your depression to me was attached to your career, because that is what we define Black women by. It's like you introduce yourself as what you are before you introduce your name, or like, hi, I'm a teacher. Like, relax. Like, but that's because as a society we have tied our worth as Black women to
Our
our career.
validation comes from what we do, not who we are. It doesn't come
Mm-mm.
from a characteristic. Um, I read on, I think on some social media, it was talking about how your definition is not, hi, I'm a loving person. When you go on a date, hi, I'm a psychologist and I've gone to school for 12 years. I have a doctorate degree in 3 different subjects and blah, 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 blah. It's not, hi, I'm a mom. I'm loving, I'm nurturing. I have all of these good qualities. I can do this and I've done that. I'm a great cook in my kitchen. We don't define ourselves by that. Even when you do a dating app, from my understanding, I ain't never did fill out one, but they talk about what you are, who you are as a the job title, right? As
Yeah, your
opposed to
occupation and all of
your
that.
occupation. There we go. Would slip my mind. But your occupation is up there first, right? As opposed to all of your other fine characteristics.
Yeah, I was watching a podcast, Michelle Obama's new podcast, which I really like.
Oh,
She
okay.
had
In my
Kiki,
opinion,
yeah, she had Kiki Palmer on there, and before Kiki Palmer even came on, they had this segment where her and her brother were talking about what they wanted to be like when they were kids or whatever. And Michelle Obama was like, it really bothers her that in second grade, y'all going around the classroom talking about what you want to
about
be when
what you
you
want to be
grow
when you
up.
grow up,
What's the like how realistic is that?
or how relevant is it even? Let's be real honest. How relevant is it at second grade? What, 7 6 7 years old?
Yeah. It's
How
like at
relevant is
that
that to
point,
life?
all you should want to be is good. Like you should just want to be a good person. Honestly, that's all
Exactly.
you should want to be all throughout life. But you know what I'm saying? Like I think we started very young, and I think that's what they were really capitalizing on is like in the second grade, we're already asking you the trajectory of your life. So at that point, you already have the pressure and the anxiety and the worry associated with how do I get from second grade to a doctor? How do I get, like
Absolutely. And so
you
now
already
I'm
thinking
provoking
like that.
anxiety in a 6 year old about his future lifestyle. Do you want to get married? Who do you want to marry? What kind of job do you want to have? Well, have you thought about where you want to live? All of these things. And so now at 6 7 years old, that is my worry. That is my concern.
Concern.
Why would
Hmm.
we do that as a society? And I think we have to be mindful of what we're doing to children because, you know, I read the book, what is it? Post-traumatic slave syndrome. And it talks about how your DNA shifts
Hmm.
based off of you as a person, and we
Your
pass it down. So
experiences.
through
Yep.
pregnancy, your DNA shifts based off of your anxiety, based off of your depression, based off of all of these things. So when you're thinking about your mental health and your anxiety, is particularly your anxiety and depression during pregnancy. Okay, is my child going to be healthy? And
But
so
I
you're
think it's even before you're pregnant, right? Because technically, as women, and I don't know why this seems so profound to me when somebody said, like, you already have all your eggs when you're
eggs
born. And
when
so
you're
all of
born,
your experiences are already
already
attached
tied
to,
up in that.
yeah. And I was like, that is so profound. Like, my great 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 grandmother had me in those times where she was experiencing whatever she was experiencing,
And so
and
that's
that's
already in your
already
that's
in
already
me.
embedded in your DNA,
That's so
right?
deep.
That is so deep and so profound, and it's actually mind blowing because when you think about how much stress, strain, pressure, abuse, whatever she experienced, that's already embedded in my DNA, right? So no wonder our anxiety is on
It's what
1,000
it
at all times.
is.
Is master gonna kill me today? Is he gonna
Some
kill
of it
my
ain't even
child?
mine. Yeah, some of it ain't
Okay,
even mine.
okay. And is are they gonna take my children and ship them 200 miles away and I never see them again? All of those things when they were stealing people from the country. Are they gonna steal my cousin next so we could at least be here to get, and I don't speak that language, so I don't understand anything but the whip. So you got all of that already formulated in your DNA. And then they wonder why blacks are so anxious about every single thing.
And I
What do
think
we
that that can go, as far as rage in men. You like because they're eggs are eggs. They're not assigned a gender. So I mean, yet they're eggs. So at that point, your son could be feeling that, and that's coming out in a different way for males than it is for females. So for us, it might be anxiety, but for a man who went through, who
It's anger
experienced
and
that,
rage. Because if
yeah,
you
it's
hit me
anger, it's
again, if
rage.
you hit me one more time, if you talk to me crazy one more time, what does that provoke in me? Okay.
Yeah,
I'm triggered by knowing, because
that word.
we do have that subconscious. I'm triggered by knowing this is the experience because I was there.
I was there already.
I was already
Hmm.
present there, right?
Hmm.
Okay, I wasn't physically here, but I was
I
present
was
because I was
here.
an egg sitting there.
Yeah, my energy
I
was here.
already have that anxiety. I already have that rage because hit me again. Talk to me
Hmm.
crazy one more time. Demean me again. Okay. Dismiss my feelings, my being. It dehumanize me one more time.
Makes
Okay.
sense to me. It makes so much, like, it makes so much sense that I feel like, I feel behind on knowing it because I'm sure that they knew it and we ain't got to go down that road. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's just like,
Right. I'm
dang,
sure it was known,
it was
and
known.
and because it was known, it should have been taught, right?
I don't even know what should have happened though.
I remember when, you know, after the George Floyd movement, right,
Hmm.
came about, and all of these initiatives were taking place, and all of this newfound love from I am worth something,
Hmm.
came to surface again, right? My cousin came to me and he was talking, and he and I, we don't talk regularly, but he one of the things he said to me is, if our grandparents and parents had taught us this, we could be so much further ahead of the game, right?
Hmm.
So having that knowledge of this is what has been done, this is how far we should be, this is what you should be doing now, looks different. Because you said we could be further along if we had known, or not knowing all of this time. This is kind of annoying that we're just now finding it out. And so I think
But I wonder though, like my only thing is I don't think that I genuinely believe that our ancestors thought that they were doing us a certain kind of, like, I don't want to make it seem like I blame them because I think they were just so they were
ready
trying
for
to
it to be
protect
over that they didn't
us.
want to live in that no more.
Yeah, they were trying to protect us. It's like, why would I put all of this on you? Like, you have the opportunity to be able to not feel what I felt. I don't want to make you feel what I felt. Like,
And I agree with you. I do believe that they were just trying to push past those experiences and not bring them into the next generation, right?
but it makes me want to parent differently, knowing that, going back to the whole, like, me dealing with my anxiety and seeing my daughter have anxiety. Like, now it's like, how do I intentionally share what I do on a daily basis to not feel so much anxiety? You get what I'm saying? Like, and I think that's part of why I can give so much grace to our ancestors is because I don't think I know. I don't know what to do. So how am I supposed to tell you? Like, I think that they did the best they could with what they had, and
Absolutely.
that didn't necessarily always work or work the way they wanted it to. And so it's like, how do I give you game that I don't have? Like, when I think about telling Zaya how to deal with her anxiety, it's like, how do I deal with my anxiety? I don't know. How am I supposed to tell you? I'm not present. Like, it's very hard to be present in the moment when you don't like the moment, you don't like the previous moment, and you don't know what the next moment is going to look like. That's hard. And that's all anxiety
Right.
is.
And that's the thing about it is, and I'll be really honest, I struggled with how much to share when you all were growing up, right?
Mhm.
So I didn't want you to feel that anxiety that was what I considered an adult situation. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? So you didn't need to know that we were on the verge of having a car repossessed. That ain't your concern. Why am I add that stress to your life?
Right.
And
And
so, how
then
do you
again, like how
navigate
we
what's
had
too
that.
much information and what age to share that information? And I think if any child has their parent around, they should actually thank them that they didn't, share so much, but also understand and give them grace for what they did and didn't do. You know what I'm saying? Give them grace. They did the best they could with what they had. And that's what I've always said. A parent can only give what they have in them. They can only work with the tools that they have, whatever that looks like. And so, did any parent get straight A's? Heck no. And there's no parent that got straight A's because we did what we could with what we had. And so navigating it is very difficult because I still struggle with how much do we really share with a kid? And I tell parents all the time, be transparent. Tell that kid that you're operating out of fear because you know what could happen, right?
Mhm.
So you're operating out of fear when you yell, scream, and say, don't ever do that. You
Mhm.
understand. So then, I'm not saying it doesn't happen and we don't do it, but I'm saying at least give them or give your child the opportunity to understand why it happened.
Yeah, I think that, being a parent, like you get it a lot more. Like I didn't understand and I felt some type of way and I analyzed the way I was brought up and then I had Zaya and I was like,
Analyze,
when
criticize, critique, all of
right.
those
It's
things
like
you did.
when like because I think the heart and I listen to podcasts all the time. I was listening to somebody podcast and they were talking about it's like a push and pull type of balance with life, no matter what area of life you're talking about. You kind of got to learn how to like ebb and flow, give and take. Like, so for example, it's like the hard part of being a parent is thinking that I want to protect your innocence for as long as possible. The more that I'm transparent with you about, the less like childhood imagination belief. Like, I don't want to always be in the store and have to have a conversation about, like, well, I have to go to work to make this money and it's still not enough money to just buy you whatever toy you want in this store, and you won't understand that until you start to work for money and then you don't have money and then the bills take your money. Like, why do you want to explain that to a 5-year-old? Granted, you don't, but at the same time, you also want them to understand the value of hard work and you want them to understand finances and like
I'm
you don't
telling
want them
you,
to feel like they
it's
just can
walking a
have the
chalk
world.
line all the
Huh.
time. You're walking a chalk line all the time. You really are. You're teetering every day, straddling the fence, however you want to word it. Because my brother and I were talking last night, and he was saying, you know, Emmett Till coming from Chicago to the dirty South, right? What did that look like for his mom to explain to him that, okay, up here, you can walk on the same side of the street, you can shake hands, you can go in the same buildings, but when you get back down there,
You
you
can't
know
do
what I'm
that.
saying? So explaining to a child adult situations and habits and expectancies, where do you draw that line?
Because it takes away part of their innocence. And I
It
think,
takes away all of their innocence. And like even to this day, I struggle with making a child feel like the entire world is demonized, right? You can't talk to people, you can't shake hands, you don't want to be around. Don't go over there and talk to them because you don't know that. And so you become isolated and not just physically distanced, but socially distanced because you don't trust. So you're taking away innocence, you're taking away trust. And then we tell them when they get 18, go out there and mingle. You
or
gotta go to
date.
school with
Like,
some,
why would
you
I
gotta
want
go
to
to
date
school with complete
anybody?
strangers. You gotta date. with somebody thinking that you might know them, you might not. All this time, it's been dangerous to talk to a man who's, what am I doing? How do you navigate that?
I don't know. And I think the sad part about it is, especially being a teacher, because I kind of got to see the other side of things. It's like you literally, I feel like you can tell when a kid's innocence has it wasn't eased onto them. Like they had to deal with the real world fast, and they seem a little traumatized by that. Like you could tell when a kid has had to be adult-ish in situations, or
They've
when
been
they've
adultified.
seen
Absolutely.
too much, they've heard too much, and then and I think that's the terrible part about public school, is because you have 30 children in a room who have this spectrum of experiences, exposure, and it's just you got a grown 10-year-old in here with a 10-year-old who's never heard certain words, and you put them out in the room and you say, make friends. Like that's absolutely utterly ridiculous, and it's scary. I don't want my kid in that classroom. Like it's too much. There's no way to control it. And I think that, that's the benefit of homeschooling, but it's also the scary part, is because at some when I don't know how
When
to
do you
tell when
introduce
you're
her to
ready for the
these?
world.
Yeah, when do you introduce her to the rest of this? Right.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was, and I thought about that as you guys were going to school, what we did in our house. We were like, okay, you can't, there's no exposure to this, and this, right? You're not prepared for it. But letting you out into the public with other kids who were, because some kids started doing dishes and staying home by themselves at 5. Y'all were 15, and I was like, yeah, no, that ain't happening. So you have these very, very different perspectives of how parenting should be and what's right or wrong. You know, what
And
is
I
right or wrong? Now,
and
I
that's what I was
will
about to say.
say,
Do we know? Does
huh?
anybody really know?
I don't think anybody really does know. And I think people base it off of their own personal experiences, whereby, like, I was like, yeah, no, you're not going to be responsible for your sibling because I had to be responsible for mine at an early age. So I was, based off of my experience, I was like, yeah, no, that's not happening. So, was it wrong or was it right? You know, because who's to say? And what experiences would have been beneficial that I did have versus those that I kept you from because of the ones I did have.
And the effect that it had on you. And I feel like, that's the whole thing. Like kids aren't cookie cutter. Like one can be ready for something and the other could completely not be ready for it. um for me, like I specifically remember certain moments in like my public school journey where I was like, my mama did not tell me about that one. Like I don't know what y'all talking about right now. Like I had those moments, and for some it kind of came off that I was naive and I could have easily like slipped into the wrong crowds or whatever, but I feel like I had this moral compass that kept me like, I might be curious but I ain't stupid, you know what I'm saying? Like it just, I waited in the gray area of public school because it was like I didn't want to be popular or whatever you want to call it, because I understood that those people knew some things that I didn't necessarily know or really want to be involved in. But I didn't want to be, ostracized and like, I don't know, not have a social group. Or so I had to find my people, and I kind of had to curate this existence in that space. And like I said, like that's a hard chalk line to walk, is like especially being even more now today with the way the world looks like
100.
the 10-year olds, the kindergartners know more than I knew in middle school right now today because of social media,
Absolutely.
because of whatever, and those conversations. Like, I can't imagine somebody having a certain type of conversation and Zaya coming home and repeating and like not even understand what she's saying. And now I got to have a conversation with you about that and take away part of your innocence in a way. I don't want to do that.
And I remember pastor preaching once before. He says, you know, back when we were growing up, they had the dirty magazines behind the counter, and you had to be so old to grab them. Now everything is at your fingertips because you got either iPad, or iPhone, or your friend got one and a
Some of
tablet
the
that plays
commercials on TV, like the ads on
commercial.
TV,
Oh
be
my
like,
God. They like show how to put on a condom and how to put where the pad go. That was never the case. When I was coming along, and it was barely a case when you came along. If you saw a commercial about a Trojan, you was like, oh, what's that? You know what I'm
and I
saying?
think it's good to have these conversations because it's like, I I part of me agrees that we've made too much taboo and too much like so secret that it's awkward to have certain
Have
conversations
the
and we shouldn't
conversation, correct.
be, but also like where's the medium of it? Like, where, how do we compromise and
I'm
say
waiting
like
for
that's
someone
just
to
too much?
man, so much is on exposure is so prevalent now. Like everything is exposed. There's nothing hidden. Okay, you could they show the shape of the bodies. They on the commercial when they're talking about what goes where until you're just like, whoa, whoa. But then at what age do you share that information so that they're aware? Like I remember when I did Keep It 100 and Jackie came in and she was talking about, oh, you have to know the proper terminology of the body parts because if something happens, you can't say my vajayjay or you can't say his thing. You got to have the proper terminology. And I'm like, oh my God. So I have to teach a kid 10 years old the proper terms in case somebody assaults them, right?
But something that I also realized is because I did that same thing with Zaya is like it's the stigma around it that creates that anxiety and discomfort for us because Zaya was just like, oh, that's what it is. Okay, that's what I'm calling. Like it was no awkwardness for her. I felt more awkward than she did. And I was
Of
trying to
course.
like conceal it so that she didn't feel shame about it because it's like why do we make that word a bad
Right.
boogie word? Like it's like you need to know your body. It's just like saying your arm or your finger. Like it's
Right,
a body
right.
part.
And so why was it ever considered taboo to say it in the first place? But I was because of and I'm old. I'll grant you, I'm old, so my parents and grandparents, they did not talk about these things.
Yeah,
I
they
had an
say your
auntie though. I had
pocketbook
an
and
auntie, I ain't
your.
gonna lie. My auntie talked about everything. She watched porn,
But older
it was
people to say
always
like older people. I done heard older people say like your pocketbook or your private, and it's just like, child.
and I don't know where it came from. I don't know the origins. I might have to look that up. Where is the origin of that? And figure out why it's so deeply rooted in a taboo
And
style or in a
shame.
pocket. Yeah. Why is that so deeply rooted in a hidden space, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I look at where we are today, and I look at, like you said, with Zaya, she understands at 5. This is what it's called. That's what it is. I'm not gonna go around just saying the word because it's no need to, because that's not
Yeah.
part of the body that we talk about on a regular
On an
basis.
everyday basis. Yeah. So it's just like it is what it
Okay.
is.
Yeah.
Next,
Yeah.
like it was
Yeah.
not. I thought it was gonna have to be a thing, but it wasn't, and I was just like, oh, okay, well that's done. Like it was. I appreciate the fact that obviously like you working in the space that you work in and knowing that, and I was wondering like, like I gotta teach her how to wash her body and all of that type of stuff, and that might be awkward, but it's like it's only awkward if you make it awkward. Like your kids are soaking up the energy and
Absolutely.
the
And
feelings that you're
they
giving off.
feel what you feel, so or what you're giving off. So if your body is tense about it, then that's going to feel some kind of way. But if you just openly have the conversation, then they will be like, oh, no big deal, because
Hmm.
it didn't tense mom up when she talked about it, and she
Yeah.
didn't look some kind of way like she was scared to talk about it, you know?
Yeah.
So it is what it is. But I
But I
think
think different conversations, like for example, I can only imagine at a certain age with having a son and having to have a conversation about like, what do you do when you get pulled over? You know what I'm saying? Like that's going to cause you some tension, some anxiety, and then they're going to feel it the first time they get pulled over because when mom or dad was talking to me about this, they were passionate, they were scared for me.
absolutely. The fear was in their tone, you know. You could feel the tension in their body through the words that came out of their mouth and how those words came out, right? The emotion that was behind it. And I think when you talk about that in particular, having to have that conversation with a young Black man as he starts to drive, and as we stated earlier, he's already got it embedded in his DNA. And now we're having to openly
Trigger that.
discuss it
Yeah,
and
we're triggering it.
triggering. Okay. And so I think people really need to come to understand what that looks like in Black America, right? Or for Blacks that are in America, even.
And and I genuinely feel like it's a process. I don't think there's a end destination for that healing because you're never fully healed. It's just like grieving. Like you never stop grieving. Time just keeps going. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I think that we have to, now that we understand our ancestors' intentions, now that we understand what our future could or could not be, we have to continue to have those intentional moments with our kids. And hope for the best, honestly, because I don't think there's a perfect age. I don't think there's a perfect maturity level. I don't think there's a perfect moment for of development. And I think that's what causes us as parents so much anxiety because it's like, do I talk about this at 6 or do I wait till 16? You know, like we have so much anxiety thinking about it. And the more you expose your kids to, like for example, if Zaya's in a mixed gender sport or something, now I feel like I actually got to have some other type of conversation. You know what I'm saying? That I wouldn't have normally had to have. So I feel like, circumstances bring about those type of conversations. Um, and we have to learn how to be more transparent about that. Like me, I try to be very transparent with her, even about like why I'm not working right now. Like I want something that has my name on it. And I don't want one career to define me. I also want to be a really good mom. And I feel like I can do that better if I'm at home more and being able to explain that to her so that she doesn't think like, oh, I just don't have to work. Like, no, actually, because I'm not working, this is why we can't do this or we can't do that. But you like me being at home, right? So it's push and pull, it's give and take. And to Michelle Obama's podcast point, like another thing that they were talking about is like putting our kids in a box and having them feel like it's only one thing that you can do for the rest of your life. That's so unrealistic in today's society. Like you'll probably go through 5 different career paths and
At
they're
least.
making new ones every day. So like how can I prepare you for a world that doesn't even exist yet?
Absolutely. And I think that with that part being stated, that there are so many variations when we're talking about going back to when we we're talking about asking a second grader what he wants to be in life. You know, 90% of America probably have had no less than 3 different career paths because as you evolve, so does your skill set or your mindset. And so then you say, hey, this would be good for me because this is what I found to really enjoy. And I often wonder, I look at people and no shade, no disrespect, who go into a field of I don't know, let's just say working at a restaurant, and they go from serving to cooking to general manager to regional to whatever that looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you said when you were in the second grade? You know what I'm saying? Are those who take these career paths postal worker? I'll just throw that one out there because that one just it really sticks in my head. You do that for 50 years. Is that what you really wanted to do in life? And if
Yeah.
not, why did you stay so long? Because of the money? Because what was your passion as a young adult? What was your passion when you turned 35? What was your passion when you turned 45, 50? Right? But yet you stayed with this
Yeah.
your entire life.
And I
And I just
think
wonder, do we ever really
no.
utilize or venture into something that we're passionate about? What do we suppress our passion until we die?
I think sometimes we do. There's a lot of thought that goes into this. So, for one, I think that at the the earlier you do that passion work, or even listening to Pastor Mike Jr., he talks a lot about your gift, and you have multiple gifts, um but they might not translate into like a talent or whatever. Like your gift, like I remember he really wanted to be a singer or something like that first, and then it was like, that's not what I'm telling you to do, because he was DJing. He started off DJing or something like that, he just said.
At college, yeah.
Yeah. And so while he was still using his gift, he wasn't using it for his purpose per se. And I think that that's so important that we start doing that work. The earlier you do that work, the easier it is for you to understand you as a person, and then find careers that align with that. So I like, for him, I like music. You can do a lot of things in that music realm that will bless people or be using your gift, but that doesn't mean you have to be a DJ. You get what I'm saying? So I feel like that's something that I had to go through. I like being creative, but I also found that I like educating, and I like learning, and I like teaching. And so it's like, how does this serve my purpose in life, but also how can I create or find a career that aligns with what I have done the work to figure out my purpose and my passion. And I think that's the bliss of life, when you finally are in a position where you're doing something that is working for you financially, but it's also working for your purpose. That's hard work, and it changes.
And that was one of the things I said and keep it every single time when we talked about careers. What is it that you are so passionate about doing that you would do for free and then figure out how to make it make money for you, right? Because it's been stated that if you love what you do, it never seems like work. Okay.
Mhm.
You never work a day in your life if you're doing what you love. So figure out what it is that you're passionate about, so much so that if you had enough money, if you had all your bills taken care of, you would do this for free. And then figure out how to make it make money for you. Because I think with me, and I was telling your dad the other night, last night maybe, how full circle this came, right? When I got out of high school, I literally said, or actually, I think I was telling Melvin, I said, when I got out of high school, I wanted to open up a community resource center. 18 years young, 17 actually, years young. I wanted to open up a community resource center because I had people in various parts of my life that poured into me when my mom couldn't and my dad wasn't. You know what I'm saying? When he was no longer there. These people, we had little leagues. They weren't even real leagues, but the adults would get off work and get all the kids together, have some cold cut meats and bread, and we go down to a park and they'd play softball with us, they'd play kickball with us, they'd play volleyball with us, all of these things. And I said, I want to make sure that the next generation still has that. So I wanted a community center so these kids would have something to do, somebody to care and teach and grow social and community skill sets, right? how to interact with one another, how to play sports and still be friends after the game, all of those good qualities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when I graduated, there was a building in the neighborhood, and I was like, okay, let me figure out who has this building because it's not being utilized for what it was once utilized for. So let me figure out if I can get this building. That way I can start this. 17 years old, thinking I could take over the world. Yay. Pinky and the brains. And I found out, okay, this is owned by the city. This is this. And I remember going to the city township person at the time. Won't spew no names, but I said, hey, that building on the corner. I said, what are you all going to do with it? I really want to build a community resource center out of it and have it where kids can come. We can do learning, with tutoring. We can then, I would love to have like a housing complex for those kids who can't go home at night or feel like their parents aren't supporting whatever, all of these things I wanted to make into this building. And he says to me, oh, that's where we house the files for the hospital. You can't have that. Knock the wind clean out of my cell, like gone. I was distraught. And so
Mm-hmm.
I went on about my merry little way. And here I am now, full circle, right? Helping kids, trying to figure out how to support them better, all of those things that I wanted to do at the age of 17. So when there is a calling on your life, it doesn't have to be the way you think it will be,
Mm-hmm.
that you use that calling,
Yeah.
but that work is still there, that
And
mission.
technically, you know, you might run the Sparks Village Community Center someday, so it might not even be done,
In
you
Jesus'
know.
name, it
It'll
does.
come back around because that's what we're working on. And I think that, I think that that passion kind of passed on to me. I never really knew that was like your out of high school goal because my out of high school goal was nothing like it. I had no I had no intentions about being in the education world or anything like that. I remember the
Or dealing
first
with children
thing,
at all
yeah, the
whatsoever.
first thing I ever said I wanted to be was an astronaut. That was the
And
first,
being a
like, that's
fashion
the,
designer was it as you were leaving school,
yeah, as I
leaving
as
high
I got
school.
older, it turned, but just that thinking alone, like starting off as a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut. I remember y'all bought me like a telescope and I loved the stars and the sky and I was just fascinated with that. And then as I got older, I was like, oh, you got to be in school for how long to do this? And like the whole rocket ships not making it. And I realized like the risk of like, if I go up, I could get stuck or I could not make it up at all. And I got to eat
Wearing
nasty.
depends because you
I got to eat what type of food?
count
We got to
me
figure
out.
something else out. Gotta figure something else out. And then like I think the whole Bratz era, like, dressing up the dolls, like kind of the era that Zaya's in, but I wasn't that intense about it. But I still really liked fashion, drawing, just being a creative, being different, standing out, and I think that that was just also part of me just figuring out who I was as an individual and not liking, still to this day, I don't like to fit in. Like, if everybody doing it, how do I do something else?
I think that's a generational thing because my mom does not fit into any mold. She's not going to dress like everybody else. I remember as a kid, we had uniforms when we were on the usher board or in the choir, and my mom would always add something to my uniform to make it
Mhm.
stand out. Like if everybody else had lapel collars that, laid around, she'd put a big bow on the top of it or a flower on the side of it, because it could not look like everybody else's look. And so,
And the
like,
crazy thing
even
is, as I got older, I kind of lost that part of me. I think I wanted to blend in more. Like, as I got older, I was tired of standing out. I realized that I didn't have to do much to stand out. Like, you already black. Like, you're standing out enough.
you,
But I think I let that, hide me a little bit. Like, part of my personality kind of switched, I would say, around the time where I went to IMSA. Like, I wanted to fit in now. Like, it was like I want to be normal. Like, I already naturally get worried because I'm smart, because I do all this stuff that they like not used to seeing. Like I just want let me wear black all the time. Like I just want to fit in.
I just say I just want to be ignored. And I still have that. I will buy clothes that nobody else will buy. Like I like the jeans that look like somebody tore them up, put them back together, redesign them. I like that because I don't want to fit the mold. And the Bible tells us we are a peculiar people. You know what I'm saying? So
Hmm.
I feel like I operate in that well. People will walk up to me and be like, "Oh, that's such a unique outfit you're wearing." I know, because if I saw everybody else in it, I didn't want it no way, you know.
And I'm trying to get back to it. I'm definitely like that when it comes to my shoe selection. Like I pick the most wonkiest color pattern. I mean the Uggs, not
With
Uggs,
the
Crocs
clunky
that I
heels,
got that
yeah,
are
the
a platform.
platform
I love
shoes.
a platform shoe. So I'm trying to get back to that in my wardrobe because it's definitely in my shoe game. But now I'm at a point where, I discovered my passion for education, and I realized that that doesn't mean that I have to be an educator. I don't have to be in a classroom. And honestly, I have realized that, and this is something that I really want to make sure that I pass down to Zaya, is no matter what your passion is, make sure that if you're going to work for somebody, your values and the place that you're working for need to align. Because being an educator, I hated the education system. Like it was like I'm conflicted on a daily basis.
Well, and I think we have to understand the miseducation of the education system, right? Okay, number one, it doesn't teach for information, knowledge, and future, right? It teaches for memorizing and regurgitating.
Hmm.
Okay. So we all know if you throw it up, you don't want it back, right?
Hmm.
And all they want to know is that you could throw it up on a test.
Hmm.
So they're not informing people. So that's the miseducation of the education system. And if you truly care about people being educated and knowing information, knowledge, retaining that knowledge, you will not fit in that mold, right? Because
Yeah.
that's not who you are. And I've been in the education field. I absolutely despise it. I absolutely despise it. But I also understand that there are some times when you have to be in spaces to help others, and that means a sacrifice. And so you make an impact and you move on. And
Hmm.
so I think that's what you did. You realized you went into it with the heart. You understood the the goal was to
Hmm.
impact lives, educate and impact lives. You still have children calling you today that
Hmm.
say, "Hey, Miss O, I did XYZ." You know what I'm saying? Because that was that season. And everything that you are called to do don't mean you're called to do it in the same manner
Forever.
the rest of your life. So
That's so good. That's so true. I think I learned that the hard way. I mean, it's an uncomfortable lesson learned because you want that. Like you want to be at some point society has told you you want to be the 30-year teacher, right? With like a gold star. But it's like nobody gives you a gold star for doing something for 30 years and you barely get good retirement off of it either. So,
okay. And let's look at it. How much respect is there for the teacher when uh, I don't want to call anybody in particular, but when an athlete can make 50 million times your salary, but they had to pass through your classroom to even get there. Okay, so where is the respect level of those who the president of the United States had to pass through a teacher's classroom where she's making $38,000 a year for him to be in a spot where he's got
yeah.
armed guards and plush retirement. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Look at the impact. You're making an impact, but you're not being satisfied by that impact because there's no real validation or uh, reward for you in it, other than the fact that, and it's self-rewarding. I tell anybody, being in the field that I'm in, being in the field that you're in, it's
It's
self-rewarding.
fulfilling.
Because when you have those kids call you and say, hey, Miss O, thanks. I appreciate that you did XYZ. That in and of itself, but from the systemic or the systematic standpoint, it's so disrespected.
And I think, exposure always plays a big role in it because, I think I started to appreciate my elementary school. Like, okay, first, let me say this. Nothing happens by coincidence. So I won't say that I didn't need anything that I've experienced. I needed it, whether it was teaching in the classroom, out of the classroom, no matter what the situation was, I see why I was there at said point in time. But as I look back over my career, when I thought about my elementary time, I was like, dang, like I got these kids at third and fourth and fifth grade, but then they still got the rest of this time for somebody to jack them up. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
I
right, right.
appreciated my impact a lot more once I started teaching at the collegiate level because it was like, I just did this. I can give you all the game and you can turn around and use it tomorrow and change the trajectory of your life forever. And you're listening to me and you're taking this in because you can see, what this has done for my life. And so being a professor gave me a whole nother like, oh, this is really cool because it's like y'all are right in it. Like y'all 4 years away from the rest of your life. So that felt a lot more impactful than even teaching in the classroom did. Because the kids, they love you, they appreciate you, and then they go on and they have another teacher and it's just like but when you're in college like you're using all of that information in real time, and I think that, like I said, exposure matters a lot because I started to see that there's more than one way to be an impactful educator. If you have a radio show, you're educating people. Now what you're talking about, what
Good,
information,
bad, or ugly, right?
but I started to see the world through a lens of an educator. Like everybody's learning all the time. If you're rapping, you're educating people. They're listening to what you're saying. They're soaking it in, and they're probably implementing some of it in their lives. Especially like some of the negative sides of rap. That stuff is being squeezed out in the young kids' life every day. The language they're using, the way they dress, all of that is impact. That's education. You're teaching them something.
Absolutely. And I think that's something to be mindful of is you can impact a youth's life in more than one way. And if that is what you are called, because, I really thought that I was supposed to have this community center and be, in the neighborhood, supporting all of the kids, giving them these opportunities and exposures that I had the luxury of having. And that wasn't it. Now I'm sitting here in foster care helping kids navigate through difficult situations, but I've been in the school set. So all this time I've had my mentor group, all this time I've still been able to touch lives of the youth coming along, the generations that come and to the next adulthood, and they will be my retirement plans. You know what I'm saying? They
And I
will take
think
over when I get to retire. And I feel like having that opportunity to impact in different segments, whether it was through the mentor group, whether it was through the education, whether it was through foster care, whether it was through therapy, whatever those look like, I've had the same mission. And so being versatile and being able to accept transition is key to any mission. What the
Yep.
Marines say, we don't plan, we improvise. You
Ooh,
have
I like
to
that.
you have to be able to be fluid because life is fluid, right? It's not stagnant. If you're stagnant, you stink because stagnant water starts to stink. It has to keep moving.
And I think that that's a good place to like wrap it all up. Is like I want to be more intentional about that in my life. That way I can again these are things that as we learn, we have to then, model, teach, instruct our kids, educate, whatever the case may be, so that they don't have to start like where they say my ceiling is their floor. I want them
Yes,
to be able to start at a point of emotional intelligence or start at the point of, okay, I know I'm probably gonna have 10 different jobs, but that don't mean I'm a failure. It just means I'm living. You know what I'm saying? Like
exactly. Then
if
you don't
we
call
can,
anybody who has 10 different homes a failure, right?
okay,
So
if
it's
we can
okay.
start like I'm trying to implement that in my life is give myself grace and and be more flexible with life. That'll cut down on a lot of my anxiety. Now how do I do that in real time and help my child do that? And the more we look at it like that, I think, we'll be closer to being on the right track when it comes to the trajectory of our kids'
And keeping
future.
in mind that we have already laid a foundation. Now it's simply building on the foundation. And we can go as high as we need to go because every ceiling is the floor to the next level.
Mm-hmm.